Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant and Founder here at Prairie HR Solutions. And in this video, I'd like to change where it is that we're getting our data from and to get you caught up on where we left off. This data here is coming from a specific tab on our sheet, and that tab is called compensation. So essentially what we did was we went over to our employee data here and carved out columns to create this information here. So I want to change this because we already have this data, and this data is existing in our employee data. So what we can do is grab all of this data, because when we start running analysis on certain things, we're going to need to grab different columns and different data sets. So what I want to do is grab all of this. It'll come over to us in a two-dimensional array, and then create a new array of the information that we need based on the analysis. That way we can just get rid of this tab altogether because we already have that information. And if you haven't watched our previous videos and you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, please go back and watch those, because what we did was we created this simple compensation analysis piece, this chart here, that pulls that data over, plots it on a scatter plot, finds the average salary, and since this is a reload of that page, it grabs the whatever data is being populated here and then just finds the average salary and average experience. So I don't know if we're going to change this or not. Maybe we're not, but we'll look at that a little bit later. The other thing that we did was we created a filter to where we can filter down by either the division, and again, it'll send the data over and then it'll get the averages for this data. And we also did it by let's see, analyst. We also did it by job title. Let me find an actual job title that we have. There we go. So this is where we're at right now. And now I just want to go change where that data is coming from. So let's jump over here to our code. And let's refresh ourselves on how we're doing this originally. So we're calling our get salary data function here. And we're referencing this comp data. This comp data gets the value of that tab called compensation, and it's returning a two-dimensional array. Then we're taking that two-dimensional array and we're using our map method to go row by row and then essentially pull out every element per row at the third index and assigning it to this key experience, and then doing the same with salary and gender. So we're going to use this part, but what we're going to change about this is where this data is coming from. So first, let's create another constant, and let's make sure we're not going to use the same constant here. And okay, so we have employee full data here, and that is getting the values of everything. So we could just use that because it's a global array. So let's just copy that over and come back over here to our thing here. Let's create a function, and let's just call this test for right now. Because just like our calculate average function, we are going to be calling this function and using the contents of this function a lot. So once we get this functional, what I'll more than likely do is create a helper function like we did here, to where we just pass the columns that we want and the indexes as parameters. But for now, let's just get it functional. So what this test function is going to do is take our employee full data. And first, let's just go ahead and log that to see how it's going to come over to us and to show that we can pull that global variable. So let's save this and then we will run this test function just to make sure there's no funny business going on. And then we're able to get it. Yep. So we're able to pull it because just that global variable doesn't exist inside a function and it's within our overall project sheet. So we are able to access it. And you'll see that it is a two-dimensional array or an array of an arrays. So what we want to do is we want to take that employee full data and we want to map it. And what we're wanting to map is a whole new array. If you remember, when we map something, it returns an array of that original array. So we're carving out certain elements and creating a new array with it. As you can see, it returns an array that contains the results. So actually, let's store this in a variable, and let's just call this variable. I'm going to create a constant because we're probably going to turn this into, again, that helper function, and this variable isn't ever going to change. We're never going to use this variable name again. And we'll just call that selected columns. Now what we're wanting our map to do is to go through this employee full data, get rid of that, and map it based on certain indexes. We want it to go row by row. We'll use our arrow. Wow. We'll use our arrow function. There we go. And what we want to return is the row at every whatever index. So let's go find our indexes here. And the first one we want is division, job title, time and current, role, experience, annual pay, and gender. Okay, good. So we want to go up and first grab our division. And a quick way that we can do this is if you have a header row, you just find the column that you're wanting, highlight it all the way over to the very first row, and then you'll see this count is 6. But since we're working on a zero based, indexes start at 0. So we just simply subtract 1. So this is going to be 5. And then the next one we're going to need is our job title. That's 18. And then we're going to need our time in current role. So that's 11. That'll be 12. And I'm writing this down as we're going, so don't think that I'm just have a great memory, because that is far from the truth. And then we need our annual salary. AD would be 29, and our gender is going to be 23. Yes, 23. Okay, so now we can go back here, and let's just do our first one here, that division column, and then let's log this out. And see what happens. So when you run a row, you're going to get an array returned to you. And that array is not a two-dimensional array. It's a one-dimensional array. Now we are going to need a two-dimensional array, but let's carry this out first. Since we are constructing an array, we can simply add on other pieces here. So we can do row. The next one is 18, that job title. And as you can see, it's trying to turn it into a one-dimensional array, But when we add multiple columns here, it's going to try to, it can't return a one-dimensional array. It's got to return a two-dimensional array. So if we run this, we're going to get an error. And the reason why this row is not defined is because this row essentially doesn't exist inside this, what it's trying to produce, because it's coming back as a two-dimensional array, but it's trying to force it into a one-dimensional array. So to fix this, we can simply turn the result into a two-dimensional array. So now when we run it, it will still produce a one-dimensional array, but it'll produce a one-dimensional array within a two-dimensional array because we're putting that result in an array, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and keep adding on to our columns. The next one was row 12. It's our experience. And then we had row 29. And then row 23. Wow, that got all screwed up really fast. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now let's hit run. And you'll see that we have now carved out every piece of information that we need that was actually already in our compensation. So we just recreated this, except it's not in the form of a sheet or sheet data. It's in the form of an array. So we can actually, once we get this functional, we can just clear this tab and be done with it and never use it. So now what we can do is look at how it is that we returned our data over to our page there. And what we did is we took that array, this array, and what we would need to do is take the array that we just created, that two-dimensional array that we just created, and map it. So let's actually create another variable. Let's just call this variable test. And what this one's going to do is it's going to take that new array we created, and then it's going to map that. And essentially what it's going to do is exactly this. Now, we don't have to change where we're referencing our indexes, because what's going to happen is, well, the reason why we don't have to change where the indexes is because we completely mirrored the layout of that sheet based on how we declared our rows. And that's why the order was so specific. You see that we're not in ordered index row. We're actually in the order of the value of the columns that we're going to be mapping. So we saved ourselves some time there. So let's just grab this and paste it. And then let's go ahead and log out this test variable. And we don't need this log anymore. Let's run it. And as you can see, what we did was the same exact thing. The salary is attached to the salary key. Whatever the gender identifier is attached to the gender, and experience is attached to experience. And this is an object. So it's an array of objects, basically. And that's what we need to do to have it functional to send over to our client side to actually populate that chart. So now what we can simply do is grab this title, and we don't need this to be called test anymore. You simply just call it salary data. Clean this up a little bit. We don't need to store this in a variable. We need to simply return this. And then what this should do is function the same exact way. I'm just doing a quick little run through in my mind about how this is going to work and where it's coming from. And I just realized that what we're going to need to do is work on some formatting. So let's go ahead and delete this. And I'm going to run this and nothing should happen. And there's a reason for that, but let's just see. And we'll talk about that reason here in a second. So let's refresh this. So it's not populating for a specific reason. And the reason is although we are populating, if you think about this, if you're trying to troubleshoot it and you're like, okay, well, I did the same exact thing, the data is just coming from a different place. Well, that may actually be the hiccup and the reason why it's not working. Because if we go back here to our sheet and we look at our compensation and say let's just grab our total experience column and let's look at the format of that. The format of that is a number. So now let's go over to our employee data, same exact thing, current annual, that's plain text. So the formatting is different, and we know it worked when we were pulling the comp data. So obviously, any numbers need to be a number. And the reason it needs to be a number is if we come back over to our HTML page where we are grabbing that data and processing it for our chart, those two series, the X and the Y, need to be a number. That's what it's looking for. It's looking for that data to be a type of a number. And then that third one needs to be a string. Now, this is going to cause us a little bit of issues because if we were to change, sorry about that, come back over here to our total rewards page, you'll see that the data needs to be in a number when we construct our table data. And if it's set as plain text, the type is going to be misaligned and it's not going to run it because it's not coming over as a number, it's coming over as plain text or a string. So we changed everything on that page to plain text. And the reason we did that was because Google Sheets has a tendency it has this auto format thing. So when we come back over here to say, let's just pull one up here and we have like our career pathing thing that we're working on. If you come over here and look at the formatting of this thing, it's automatic. So Google puts in this automatic formatting thing, and that automatic formatting thing is not a recognized type of data for JavaScript or Google Apps Script. You have to set the formatting to something. And we did that for our records management because we needed to pull everything back into plain text in order for it to populate in those fields. So what we're going to have to do to get this to work is to come back over here to our employee data. And we are going to essentially make these two fields not populate within our records management for the time being. And we can fix that. We can fix that after we get it functional. So we need this to be a number. We need this to be a number, and we need our annual salary to be a number. Current annual salary, and this needs to be a number. And then gender, let's just make sure the gender is plain text. Plain text, good. Okay, so now let's go back over to this. And I should, just in case you have been following along, before we only had 50 employees. I went ahead and expanded that simply because if we're going to do some analysis, I would like to show how it handles more than one or more than a small group. So I created a code that would randomly produce all the employee data, just random. As you can see, it's pretty simple. But we have now 500, which will give us a larger data set to populate. Okay, so let's go back here. Just don't want you to be surprised. I say, where are all these numbers coming from? Because in that comp tab data, there was only, I want to say like 50 or, yeah, about 50. Okay, so let's refresh this and see how that works now. And there we go. So now you can see that all of our data is populated here. And then once this data is populated, it then finds the average salary and experience of that data. And our filtering should still work. Let's go finance. As you can see, we have 6 people in finances. Maybe what we can do here is also an employee count. We can do it like total employee count, and then maybe another field. Let's make sure the job title of finance coordinator works. Okay, we have finance coordinator, very well paid finance coordinator, but everything is working. So if we come back up here to choose, and that's the other thing that we're going to have to actually work on is how to handle the user input with this based on situations. If job title is choose, or we can call this something different, which we probably will. If job title is choose, then it'll just be all the divisions. Maybe we can disable this or something. So we'll work on that with logic. But now we actually have this functional. And we can come back over here to our compensation page and just simply delete all this because we don't need it anymore. And I doubt we'll ever need this compensation tab. So what we can do is just simply delete this tab, and we can come back over here to our code. On our analytics and get rid of all of this. Just make sure it's not being pulled somewhere else. Web app, web app, web app, web app. Okay, so our comp division filter will have to change, and our comp job filters will have to change. So what we can simply do is just change this reference, and that reference is going to be not this comp data, it's going to be our comp, it's going to be this, our full employee data. Here and here. And then our comp division was 5. And our job title, let's go over here and make sure we get the job title down pat. So let's see, job title is 18. And there we go. So now let's save this and actually run it. So let's get rid of this because it's going to try and call it. It doesn't exist. And nothing should change. Our filter should still work. And they don't. So let's go back and see what we did here. Employee full data, row 18. Experience that. Row 5. Let's go back up here and see if it is our formatting. Yep, row 5. Can be plain text, and our job title is going to be plain text. So let's go see if we did anything else somewhere. Okay, let's go back over here to our code because that's probably where it is. Everything's fine there. So we're passing this value, getting the comp data filter function, creating a variable, employee data filter. Okay, so we're filtering our entire data. So if we were to, let's just log this out and see what we are getting. And I think I see what the issue is, or at least I'm foreseeing what the issue is here. Thought I deleted that. Okay, so now let's run it. Comp division is not defined. I wish Google would just add a letter when I need it to. Okay, so we have an empty array. So let's just give this something here to return. Now let's run it. Okay, good. So what it's doing is it is returning the entire line. And when we look at our comp division piece here, there's a couple ways that we can handle this, because when we try to map that, we're trying to set the experience to row 3. Well, the experience, or the index of every row at the third index. So let's come over here and look at this. And what we're trying to do here is the third index is 0, 1, 2, 3. Well, that's the last name. So we simply just need to change that filter to, our first one was experience. So that's going to be 13 or 12. No, that's not right. Yep, that is going to be right. Okay. 12 in this new data set. And then our salary is going to be 29 and then 23. So what we could do is we can handle this two different ways. What we could do is like what we did up here and map this all out and store it in a variable, or we could just handle that right here in our filter. So this one was 18. No, this is 12 was our total experience. Our salary was 29, and then our gender was 23. And then we can simply change this back to div value. And then this is going to be the same exact thing. This is going to be 12, 29, and 23. This way we're not having to create another map and then run it. We can just run it straight from this two-dimensional array down into here by changing the index pieces. Okay, so now let's save this and then come back over here to our UI and refresh it. All right, there we go. So we have all of our data. And let's just pick, let's see what marketing is doing. We haven't seen marketing in a while. Let's just pick a division. It should filter it, and it does. Good. And then we should do the same exact thing with our job title. Sales manager. Wow, we have a lot of sales managers. But the point is the functionality works. So I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video, we'll create that helper function, because I want to make sure that we understand how this helper function is going to work. And it's going to exist in the same concept as our calculate average helper function, except it's not going to take one argument, it's going to take two arguments. And the first argument, of course, is going to be that data, that array of values. And then the second argument is going to be in the form of an indexes. And those indexes are simply going to be all of these numbers here. And then that way we can pass it to this function over and over and then have it return that data set, that column. So I'm going to end this video here. I hope this was beneficial. If you like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button and we can continue to bring you content such as this. If you do have an idea on something that you would like us to put together, please drop us an email. And until next time, please take care.